Hey everyone, this is Adam Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Happy Friday, everybody. Today we are going to talk a little bit about karma. We have a full moon lunar eclipse coming up in the sign of Pisces. I say full moon lunar eclipse because sometimes if I just say lunar eclipse, people don't always know the difference between lunar and solar. Lunar eclipses are always full moons. So a full moon in Pisces that is a lunar eclipse this weekend happening on Sunday. We're going to take a look at that today. We're going to talk more broadly about why eclipses are so weighty. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the ancient Indian astrological perspective on karma, the laws of karma, maybe some of the relationships that eclipses have to karma, and also how you can heal or remediate difficult karma. All, I think, really interesting conversations. I want to say in advance that you don't necessarily have to believe in any of these things to find today's talk interesting. The purpose of my talk is not to present you with certainty or any kind of dogma about the universe, because I don't know. It's above my pay grade. But as someone who spent a number of years really steeped in the Bhakti yoga tradition and spending a lot of time trying to understand the Vedic scriptural tradition and the Indian astrological and philosophical tradition, that is certainly where most of what we understand about karma in Western astrology actually comes from. There are some counterparts in the Western tradition like fate and destiny, the laws of fate and destiny, and things that Western mystical traditions have said that are strikingly similar. So I'll talk about that a little bit as well. But I want to explore this idea of eclipses being karmic, how and why they are, and then broader problems that we tend to run into with conversations about karma, how we can work through some of those things, and maybe also just some practical advice that has been given to us by these traditions about how to improve bad karma or difficult karma. So anyway, I hope this will be a fun, interesting way of entering into an eclipse weekend. Before we get into it, as always, remember to like and subscribe. It really helps our channel grow tremendously when you give us that little thumbs up and subscription. Apparently, there's a new hype button. My social media manager was telling me about this. He does all of the posts and everything. He was saying, tell people to hype us if they like it. Okay, I don't know what that is, but hype us if you like it. Anyhow, you can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. We are just weeks away from the end of our early bird registration period for our 2026 retreat. So if you go to the events page, click on Immersive Retreat, the Oracle Within is a training in the theory and practice of divinatory astrology taking place in Mexico next June. We still have about 35 spots left or so, but over halfway full now. So make sure that you take advantage of that while the early bird rate is still in effect. After the end of today's talk, there's an informational video about the retreat, which you can watch to learn more about it. The whole purpose of this retreat, though, is to focus on how to refine the oracular component of our practice of astrology. There's technique, there's counseling, there's theory, but there's also this strange side of astrology that we don't always talk about, which is the oracular side, where we are having to learn to listen to an oracle speak and convey what it's saying. So that's going to be the focus of this retreat. I can't wait. Check out the live talks as well. This month, I'm doing a talk on Mercury's planetary pairings. This will be looking at the philosophical and archetypal meaning of Mercury paired with every other planet. Really, really important to understand and work with planetary combinations and pairings. If you have them in your own chart, it's super helpful to know what they mean. If you are working with clients, very helpful to have an understanding of how each planetary pairing combines philosophically and archetypally. So that'll be a fun talk. If you can't attend live for any of our talks, you get the recordings afterward always. So anyway, let's go to the real-time clock. I want to point out, remind you that Sunday, we have our lunar eclipse in the sign of Pisces that is coming through. And it's happening. I mean, if I do this down to the hour, this is Central Time, United States, on Sunday, September 7th. The eclipse takes place about 1:00 p.m. Central Time. That's the time zone that I'm in. That would be, 11 or so a.m. if you're on the West Coast, 2 or so in the East Coast, and translate that if you're in another country. So the eclipse is coming through in the sign of Pisces. What's interesting to me about this is that this eclipse is hosted by Jupiter, who is just separating from the square to Mars. This makes our eclipse really fascinating from a few different standpoints that I would like to talk about today. And use it as an opportunity to explore a larger conversation about eclipses and karma. So, first of all, let's talk about eclipses and why they are so karmic. We're going to just for a moment assume the use of the word karma and then we have any idea what we're talking about. And then we're going to open that conversation up a little bit and admit that we don't know what we're talking about. So, for starters, eclipse seasons are thought to be very karmic. By that, we mean that they tend to amplify the feeling that destined events, fated events, and themes that are the result of the soul's history, past choices, and patterns are coming to a head or are fruiting. So, lunar eclipses in particular, and full moon, just like a full moon, tends to bring up the fruit in the garden of your karma. You think about your life like a garden in which karmic plants are always blossoming. The full moon is like the moment at which there's several different plants whose colors are showing. They're the results of prior activities and cycles of the soul and its history across many lifetimes, and within this lifetime are showing their fruits. They're bearing their fruits. That is not inherently good or bad. It's just a kind of basic matter of karmic physics, you might say. We start to understand how that might show up specifically based on the nature of each individual eclipse and where it is falling very specifically within your birth chart. That makes interpreting eclipses for huge audiences of people really difficult, because if I say something unanimously good, you're going to get it wrong, because many charts will have some of these eclipses landing in difficult places, houses configured to difficult transits at the same time, right? Other people, it may coincide with really lovely time periods or transits. And so it's almost impossible by looking at an eclipse alone to say, well, this is going to be a really great one, or this is going to bring this, or this is going to bring that. House location is always important. So this is why at the beginning of the month we did horoscopes and looked at the whole sign house of Pisces for this eclipse in particular. You can at least get a sense of what topics and what area of life are going to be bearing their fruits, karmically speaking, around this time. Solar eclipses tend to be about the activation of new karmic cycles. That new cycle may be facilitated by previous cycles. They're not necessarily brand new in the sense that they have nothing to do with the past. So new cycles are often perpetuated by the conclusion of old cycles. Sometimes things are relatively brand new. Sometimes they're not. I would say, for example, our solar eclipse happening on the 21st of this month is with the South Node in Virgo. South Node eclipses tend to be more about the crystallized wisdom that comes from the past, spiritual and psychological insights that crystallize. And so new cycles that are being perpetuated by an old cycle or crystallized insights that provide the starting point for a new cycle would be more common. So that's a little nuance with the South Node solar eclipse. A North Node lunar eclipse also has a similar little nuance to it, but in the opposite direction, where there are things coming to a head. There's more of a fruiting and a moment of karmic completion, culmination, resolution, and fullness from the past, but it's now intimately tied to new desires and directions that are opening up, which is more common for the North Node. So how does past karma fruiting right now perpetuate new desires within the soul? If you have laid the groundwork for things in the past that you are now seeing blossom, it wouldn't be surprising to see this blossom simultaneously open new doors of new avenues of expression, new desires, new pathways. The newness is more like a solar eclipse, but the reason that a lunar eclipse can facilitate it in this sense is because of the North Node. So, for example, let me give you an example that it's a little dark, but it's pretty common for something like this. When a grandmother passes away, there will often be, in that sense, the culmination or completion of a cycle of karma is very lunar eclipsy. In fact, lunar eclipses can be very literal sometimes in terms of older women passing away. But let's just use that as an example. Well, when it's with the North Node, even though grandma passing away feels like the completion of a cycle with a lot of history, a lifetime, right? And it's coming to its completion, she's leaving her body. That's very lunar eclipse like. However, with the North Node, what if that were to facilitate for you, her daughter, or you, her granddaughter, a sudden, clear sense of new desires or ambitions that are arising somehow because of the release of her body from her soul from this body? That is a kind of, it's just, I'm using it because it kind of is an exaggerated example, but a North Node eclipse that's a lunar eclipse can be something like that, where there's a release of old karma, but that it also can facilitate the opening of a new door in this specific instance because it's connected to the North Node. Fascinating, fascinating eclipse. Now, what also makes this eclipse really interesting is the fact that this eclipse is hosted by Jupiter in Cancer, an exalted Jupiter in Cancer. So the potential for themes related to home, family, women, the maternal or mothering qualities, nurturance, devotion, emotional needs, safety, emotional intelligence, and vulnerability, all of those themes could be particularly pronounced during this eclipse because the host is Jupiter in Cancer. On the other hand, the fact that Jupiter in Cancer is square to Mars in Libra, a debilitated Mars in Libra, could mean that this eclipse also features some very challenging, and let's call them emotional experiences of karma. And the reason that I use karma specifically, even though everything in astrology is karmic, is that Libra in particular tends to activate within us an awareness of law. Could be societal law, lawsuits, getting sued, the HR department kind of law, the law and order of a civilization and its government, the laws that govern councils and committees, the laws that govern international relations. Libra is very much about the workings of cosmic law that are cognizable to us on a rational human level. Jupiter in Cancer, on the other hand, as it is exalted in the sign of Cancer that was called the gateway of mankind, is far more related. Jupiter, a very karmic planet, a planet that is called Guru in Indian astrology, and one of the functions of the Guru is to help us become free from karmic bondage. So Jupiter, a planet intimately tied to law in the universal sense, distilled down societally. But when Jupiter is in the sign of Cancer, the sense of law that Jupiter in Cancer is often connected to is more cosmic and natural and overarching and sort of big. And whereas Libra's connection to karma, when we think about karmic law, in the Libran sense, we're usually thinking about exchanges of, fair or unfair, just or unjust, merciful or punitive. And we're thinking about those exchanges in terms of how they operate in day-to-day human relationships and in the governance of a civil society. So if you wanted to put it simply, I would be like, well, if you observe nature like BBC Planet Earth, and you kind of observe it from a Taoist perspective, you might be a little bit more in the sphere of Jupiter in Cancer, which was traditionally associated, again, with the birth of the cosmos itself and with this overarching sense of cosmic law. But that cosmic law it's a totally different experience from Cancer to Libra, again, where in the sign of Libra, it's rational, it's cognizable, it's intelligible, it's sensible, it's cultural, and it's societal. So the point being that in this moment of karmic blossoming with Jupiter in Cancer squaring Mars in Libra, the potential for us to be thinking about cosmic law, karmic law, fairness, justice, injustice is potentially quite strong. And I think that gives us an opening for a little deeper meditation on karma. Because here's the thing, is that I have, in my experience of teaching astrology for many, many years, lots of people very understandably bristle at the mention of karmic law, and for very good reasons. Again, because there's so many explanations of karma that are so simple, and there's something about the simple-minded way that karma is sometimes explained that's pretty offensive, actually. It's offensive to our sensibilities, especially our Libran sensibilities. So, what I want to do is give you the best understanding. These are all notes from a series of workshops that I took part in as an aspiring devotee of the Bhakti Yoga tradition, in which I was reading literally thousands of pages of Vedic scripture and listening to hundreds of hours of lectures on Vedic Shastra, much of which included the workings of karma. So I'm not an expert. I'm not, but I do have some pretty solid experience. So I'll represent what I learned literally from my notes the best that I can. And it's my hope that whether anyone actually believes in karma, I don't think you have to believe in anything to do astrology. Honestly, you could be nothing more than an awe-inspired poet who longs to hear the cosmos speak in this riddling language, and you don't know anything but that's fine. I do not even know if I believe in karma. I'm being honest. I probably do, I guess, but I don't sit around with some kind of self-righteous certainty about topics that are this big. I really don't think that's a good idea. So keep that in mind and access this with a lightness, a curiosity, I hope. But anyway, let's talk. But I think one of the reasons it's important is, again, because this transit and this eclipse in particular can bring up questions about cosmic fairness. Like, are we living in an intelligible cosmos that's fair, just? Are there laws of spiritual evolution that are taking place from soul to soul or across the universe itself, the cosmos itself? These are questions I know we all think about, even if we don't know the answers. So let's hear from what some of these earliest mystics, let's hear what they had to say about this and try to understand it the best we can. And then maybe take that as a meaningful point of reflection into the eclipse this weekend. All right, so number one, what is karma? Well, this is the main text that I studied: Vedas, Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutras. Those are some of the spaces that I am, let's say, most familiar with. So we'll start there in terms of references that I can point you to. But according to these texts, karma is really very basically the interacting laws of cause and effect. The fact that they exist and that they cover all action whatsoever. The word karma, the Sanskrit root of the word is kri, which means to act, to do, or to create. So karma means action and has implied within it the sense of reaction, action, outcome, action, consequence, action, reaction, and not just in a super linear way, but in a spiraling, like infinitely entangled kind of way. Like, almost think of this I think it helps if you think about things like quantum entanglement and karma, because it is being imagined within an interconnected cosmos that is anything but like simple and too linear, right? So that is, and this is, so in other words, karma is not just about like good actions and bad outcomes, or bad actions and good outcomes, or it includes a moral dimension, but it is far vaster than questions of morality. It has more to do with almost like the physics of light and dark and opposites that are constantly interacting and balancing and rebalancing and polarizing and unpolarizing and so forth. So so that's the first thing, is that take karma out of a purely moral context and think about it more as like this mandala of movement that has a kind of intelligible design that's inherent within it. Okay, so that helped to me. That really helps, because again, as we're just thinking of, like, if you do good stuff, you get good stuff. You do bad stuff, you get bad stuff. That's a very small portion of what karma is from the ancient Indian astrological perspective. So there are also types of karma, and the types of karma are samchita, parabdha, and agami. And I may be pronouncing the Sanskrit incorrectly, but again, whether you believe in any of this or not, the samchita will be the like total accumulation of your karma over many lifetimes. It's just like all of it. Prarabdha is that specific allotment or portion that is ripening, speaking of the garden, in your lifetime, which the birth chart has the power to represent, at least in part. So we have a portion of karma in this lifetime, and the birth chart can reflect a portion of that portion through its symbolism and the activation of different timing techniques that show when different portions of the garden as it's represented by the chart will manifest. And then agami is the kind of karma that is new karma that's being created by present actions, which will bear fruit in the future. There is also some karma that's very instant, meaning you call your friend a name and then you turn around and accidentally run into the wall. And so some agami karma can manifest literally within like 2 seconds. Some of it can manifest in 2 days or 2 weeks. Some of it is planting seeds that are deeper, whose effects and patterns will spread out over many lifetimes and will gradually manifest and deliver their results over many lifetimes. So karma also has it's like there's different levels at which these things are planted and ripen and deepen and solidify and express and burn off as patterns. So some patterns are fast and sparkly, some are deep and long, and that's another way of that the karma is typically talked about. Now, karma and transmigration, why does it exist? Why does karma exist? Well, one of the main things that it exists for is as a vehicle for the soul's evolution. In a sense, karma is nothing more than the description of the laws that will provide provide the flow of events by means of which you learn and grow and evolve as a spirit soul. And that somehow reality itself is facilitating the evolution of being itself and of each individual soul, each individual jiva. The soul, the Atman, is eternal, but it's here to have experiences. And the unresolved karma is not just unresolved as in the sense of you got something wrong, you fell, and now you need to correct it or be redeemed from it, but more so it is the means by which, the grace and the mercy by means of which you get to experience yourself, divinity, life, reality, and grow and learn and evolve. And so karma is literally just a way of saying that the cosmos is alive and it's filled with movement and action and activity and events and experience by means of which, as your soul experiences it, will learn and grow and evolve. And the whole cosmos is just this, facilitating the growth and deepening of being itself. So it's actually pretty beautiful on that kind of big picture level. And it also on that level is really not being depicted in this big macro sense as strictly moral. All experience whatsoever is good from this standpoint. It's all facilitating growth, evolution, etc. Perspective. So the other thing that karma is used for, in addition to being a part of the facilitation of the soul's journey, is like we're here to have experiences, in other words, and karma is just that. Not good or bad, it's just experience. And then there's another sense in which karma exists to maintain cosmic order, rita, which is very close to the Greek counterpart of harmonia, which means that the nature of the cosmos itself is working according to often mysterious laws of cause and effect. It's like a huge weather system that's intelligent. It's an animal. It's a cosmic being that is whose experiences and ongoing unfolding is working according to a kind of order, a kind of intelligence. It's not. So the reason for that is really important, because if it weren't intelligible if it weren't cognizable, understandable, then that the idea would be that we would have no way of being self-reflective and recognizing who we are or what is real. So by its very nature, it's intelligent. So karma is sort of like nothing more than saying the cosmos is alive and intelligent. I think it really helps to understand it that way. So anyway, karma is a big part of the transmigration of the soul in terms of just the vehicle of experience itself. It's also facilitating cosmic law, cosmic order, cosmic harmony. So let's talk about karma and free will. Hold on just a second. So one thing that's really important is to understand that, broadly speaking, while karma reflects that there are mysterious laws that govern how our choices interact with a web of other circumstances and choices and beings who also have free will in determining the sequence of events that will come from actions and choices and determining outcomes and responses and reactions. But in order for this to be the case, free will is also presupposed, which means that it wouldn't make sense for the cosmos to be constantly weaving so many choices together into meaningful outcomes and interactions and sequences of events if there weren't free will choices that were being taken and orchestrated together in the first place. So one thing that people frequently misunderstand about ancient astrologers in the East and West is that because they thought that a certain amount of the soul's fate or karma is predetermined and can be seen through the birth chart, which is a true thing that ancient astrologers in both the East and West believed. They believe that that means that there was broadly a belief that there was no free will, that everything was predetermined. There were some really hard total determinists, and total determinism does exist in the ancient world. But broadly speaking, whether it's the system of karma or its Western mystical counterparts, the laws of fate or karma are interacting with free will choices in a mysterious, constantly readjusting, formula that is as ever present and changing as the cosmos itself. And so while the reason that certain things are fated in this lifetime from this perspective is because we're a transmigrating soul who has karma that's going to fruit in this lifetime from previous lifetimes, that it's too far along in the process to just like suddenly reverse. However, there's also room made constantly for the ability to eliminate or burn off karma in terms of things like remediation, or in terms of the development of virtue, or of spiritual practice, or of a guru and the power that a guru or a teacher, spiritual teacher, or religious or spiritual path might have to cleanse the palate, so to speak, and maybe burn off karma. And so there's room left for like fate to be changed or altered by all sorts of different things. But it's also broadly agreed upon in both traditions that the birth chart seems to depict and regularly predict things that can't really be changed or altered on some level. And so that comes from the idea that the soul is carrying with it karma from its journey. This is just one leg of the journey. And so there's things that we're here to experience in this lifetime that are sort of promised or destined parts of the lifetime. But how open they are to being changed, how firmly fixed they are, that's pretty mysterious within the tradition itself. There's been debates about that for thousands of years. So anyway, that's a little background, because sometimes people think that karma sort of cancels out free will, and it's more of an intricate dance between choices and outcomes in a huge cosmic orchestration, which is also, by the way, why these traditions, my favorite example being from the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna tells Arjuna that not even the wisest sages clearly understand the laws of karma. They exist. We know they exist. We can tell they exist, especially in certain key destined moments where things play out in a way that we just go, wow, that feels like a destined event that was really educational, enlightening. I can see and feel the sense of fate or karma playing out And that experience was so meaningful, and I can just feel it. But there are many other times and experiences in life where we just go, what the fuck was that? How does that make any sense? We can't understand it. In fact, it can feel deeply unjust and unfair, and can make us question something that seems so simple-minded and kind of stupid, like karma. So anyway, and hence why I get that people often really don't like the idea of karma. Makes a lot of sense. Anyway, so this comes round to the idea of karma and morality. Karma is more of the mysterious laws that govern and orchestrate the entire cosmos itself, including the billions and billions of constant up to the second free will choices that are being made, but also sequences of actions that come forth from them that are designed to give feedback and meaningful pathways of spiritual evolution for each soul in the cosmos itself. So is karma moral? No, it's bigger than that, but it does have a moral dimension, because part of our lives in this human world is deeply moral. And that's a meaningful part of the human experience. And certainly even almost like examples of morality that exist in different species too. We're not completely alone in having a moral dimension of our experience, I don't think. But certainly it's a unique part of being human that we have to deal with and encounter questions about the right action. What is the right, good, virtuous thing to do? And I'm not here to tell you exactly what that is, because I have to figure that out every single day, making choices as a parent, as a spouse, as an astrologer, as an individual soul who's doing my best to live virtuously without that being a hollow, phony or shallow kind of thing either. A morality that's driven by a simple list of do's and don'ts is not. I do not think that is typically what the sages are talking about when they talk about karma and morality. They're talking about a kind of alignment that is moral. I mean, it tends to be humble. It tends to be selfless, kind, compassionate, forgiving, tolerant, patient, peaceful. So there are hallmark attitudes that we observe in people that are good, right? But it's never as simple as a list of rules, and it's not a simplistic moral, um, uh, like algebra. So ethical conduct in relation to karma is important, but it is not a guarantee of anything. Like, well, if you act good, then you get good things. Because the other thing that's really clear is that attachment to outcomes, if I do this, I'll get this, is still considered problematically selfish. And so acting good for the thought that it will get you good things is sort of missing the point. Not acting bad because of the fear that it will give you bad things is only part of the point. And so there's this larger framework in which the morality of karma is taking place that is about this kind of purity of spirit and the sense of alignment that is in some ways bigger than morality itself. The lightness of a light enlightened being is not exactly like a simple moral picture. It's certainly not immoral, but yeah, it's not like a good Catholic schoolgirl or something. You know what I mean? So the other thing that's really important is that there's this dance between the laws of karma as they exist in clear social codes and those situations that require a much deeper and less superficial substantive exploration of what is right in a given moment, what is true or real or authentic in a given moment, which is also considered moral. The kind of honesty of and sincerity of selfhood is itself an act of morality. Being honest, simple, pure, without pretension, those are difficult things to find within ourselves at times, because they can't be rooted simply in equations that are clearly spelled out for us in each situation. And these are parts of how we evolve as a spirit soul that are a very complicated level of how karma is thought to be administered every single moment. This makes presence really, really important. That one of the things we see repeated over and over when it comes to remediating difficult karma, which I'll get around to in a second, is presence. Presence is almost like the best place from which to come from the heart and therefore find right aligned actions that are not about attachment to good. Because even attachment to goodness, as opposed to badness, tends to be problematic in Indian philosophy in terms of like how the soul is evolving. That's all really subtle stuff that I think most of us, we can hear this and go like, yeah, I know what this is about, but it's not easy in each situation to find these little balancing points. All right. Well, number 6 is the law of cosmic justice. And so it's really important to understand that in the broader sense, not the Libran sense, but that sort of Jupiter and Cancer sense, that karma is impartial. It is not about rewards and punishments. It is just, it's like the natural intelligence of a flowing river. And so what is really difficult for us is that most of the sages in the Indian tradition, especially those who tie karma to astrology, tell us to be careful about looking at the presence of fated events in life as delivering you good results or bad results because of good or bad past actions. That way of thinking reinforces a kind of morally simplistic delusion about the nature of reality itself. And so that, to me, is one of the reasons why so many people don't like karma. It seems simplistic and it doesn't acknowledge some of the deeper spaces of existential doubt that we struggle with as beings who have to contemplate, like me in Minneapolis here, taking my daughter to the school on her first day, and within 10 minutes of her school, there's a school being, shot up. It's like, what the hell is that? It would be the tritest thing in the world for me to say, oh, well, that's just the mysterious, ineffable laws of karma balancing something out that I can't see. I'm sorry. I just don't go there. I'm not going to go there because I don't know, within my human experience, that explanation to me, that response to have to tidily summarize why unspeakably horrific things happen, or, why we have more guns than people, or like all these things, to me, that comes back to that question of alignment. Does that feel like does that feel in my, if I'm present, does that feel like the response? No, that's some kind of weird rational attempt to bypass something. But my point is that if you read carefully what sages within this, broadly speaking, karmic Vedic tradition have said, they're not that stupid where they're like, oh, terrible things happen and it's just karma. It's just the impartial laws of a beautiful cosmos that you can't understand playing out. So just accept it and trust God. I mean, maybe someone who's really cranky decides to say it that way, but does that feel like a sagely response to the unthinkable? No. Right? So karma has to go beyond simple and sometimes very obvious levels of morality that we deal with. You have to be able to compartmentalize and say, there's a level in my life on this plane in which this dark, terrible thing that is unjust happened. And it can exist within this larger container that I don't understand, that I'm going to stay curious and humble in the presence of, but I'm not going to also use to offer simplistic explanations and bypass my dharmic field of existence, which is here and now, where my soul is meant to evolve by encounters with something that is unjust. Do you see what I mean? So that tension is something that sages tell us we have to hold. Krishna tells Arjuna, you have to hold that tension, not try to resolve it by collapsing into one side or the other. Collapsing into one side might be, well, if I eliminate, whatever, auto or semi-automatic rifles or whatever, assault rifles, and get the law fixed, then the society will be fixed, and then I'll, I'll achieve moksha from that. That might be a great societal victory, but the thought that that would deliver eternal happiness is misguided. But so too is the idea that you can just bypass the problems of this world by saying like, oh, well, there's always darkness and it plays a role in creation. So whatever, you know, karma requires that we be more nuanced about there's multiple levels at which experience and reality is playing out. And it's about making room and space in our hearts for all of them. So karma and liberation in the Indian tradition, as in many Western mystical traditions, the soul is seeking enlightenment. Now that can be thought about in many different ways. I'm not sure how useful it is for us to try to think about what enlightenment is or what it looks like or how it happens. But it is very clearly stated that liberation from identification with karma is a goal. That's very clear in both Western mystical traditions that practiced astrology early on and Eastern. What that means, broadly speaking, is that for us as astrologers, the language of astrology is meant to help us find meaningful pathways of contemplation, reflection, the ability to stay close to humility, acceptance, curiosity, peacefulness, love, compassion during times that for us are karmic, and meaning fated events manifest. We feel like we have very little control over fated events that manifest, and whether they're good or bad, to stay curious about them rather than becoming attached or identified with them, which doesn't mean we don't experience them. It means we experience them with a poetic eye, with reflexive, artistic, creative, thoughtful engagement. And that by doing that, we stay free from deeper and more complicated and problematic levels of entanglement. So that karma becomes a facilitator of a soul growing rather than something that we get more and more lost in. And it's very clear in both East and West that the potential to get more and more lost in ignorance is there. Avidya, that karma has the power of avidya, which means illusion or ignorance, or it can avidya, like it can cover us. And so we study astrology not so that we can explain why everything happens in some simple framework of karma or morality or fate, or it just had to happen this way. No, it's not that simple. It's not that impatient. It's more about staying engaged in what's unfolding with some broader perspective, but also just a willingness to accept what's happening as it unfolds. That even as we experience pain and suffering, that we allow for those things to exist. I heard someone on I don't know, it was like an Instagram reel somewhere. They said, what do you think healing is? And he said, healing is not getting rid of sadness, but it's when sadness or pain has a place in your life that's okay. It's like, this is sad. This is painful, but it's okay that it's sad and painful. I think that when we talk about using astrology to learn to live with karma, it's like that. It doesn't explain it away neatly. It just allows for it to exist. So karma and liberation are not necessarily about, I don't personally think about them as getting out of this body, getting out of this world. I think about it as getting out of ignorance, which to me is when I'm so attached to the fruits of my actions and outcomes as they're happening that I lose humility and interest and curiosity and presence. And it happens to me all the time. But the astrology, boy, does it help. It really, really helps my life in that way, which is why I do it and why I believe in it so deeply. From the karmic perspective, every experience, pleasant or painful, can be an opportunity for insight, growth. The universe is designed to allow for all experiences, not as punishment, not as getting something right or getting something wrong, but as deepening into the nature of our being, which is, from the Vedic standpoint, eternal. It's like, if you ever read Course in Miracles, it's like, what do you have to fear really when the more that your awareness that you're an eternal being sinks in, the easier it is to open ourselves to the flow of reality, which on this bigger level is, again, it goes beyond questions of morality, even while we experience them. Okay, I think we're just about done. We have a hard time with karma because we do not always see the connections between actions, past patterns, and results, so they don't always make sense and they're not always clear to us. We identify with outcomes. We are attached to outcomes, which creates entanglement, which also can skew our sense of what fairness is or shouldn't be. I would say that's the biggest one, because most of the time when we say that's unfair, that's unjust, that shouldn't have happened, from a much broader cosmic perspective, we can't help but operate from the interests of our limited temporary position karmically. And so and that's a real thing that's really, really difficult. Also, there's time lag. Karma doesn't always manifest right away. And so one of the great benefits of astrology is we can study cycles, we can study patterns, we can say, oh, look, this transit was here when you were 17, it's recurring at 35. The ability that astrology has to help us clearly connect timelines and patterns is profound, because that can help us deepen into and trust our experiences more. Karma ripens and expresses itself in many interesting cycles and along very interesting timelines. Astrology can help us see those and therefore trust that their existence is meaningful and okay. But the time lag, the clouding of our sense of what is fair or isn't, our limitation within a human sphere of fairness and justice and injustice, which exists at one level while also being contained in this much bigger level, the veiling power of karma itself because of attachment. These things are very, very difficult for us. Finally, how to remediate karma. People frequently come in and they say, like, what gemstone, what plant, like what, and there are many different remediation pieces of remediation advice that have been given over hundreds and hundreds of years. This plant for this placement in your chart, or this gemstone on this finger, this day of the week. I believe outside of any specific remediation traditions, rituals, amulets, gemstones, plant medicine, I believe in all of those. I don't teach any of them because I'm not so steeped in the remediation traditions. My wife, certainly as an herbalist, we will sometimes bring her in, and she has great pieces of advice for which plants to pair with certain transits. And Saffron on our staff knows a ton about gemstones. In our Roots and Spheres program, she incorporates gemstones into our moon cycles. So I love all of that stuff. And certainly that's always advisable. However, within the Vedic tradition, there are specific things that can be done, and these can be done by any soul anywhere and are the easiest, fastest way to improve your karma. But they improve your karma not just by delivering more, let's say, pleasurable or desirable outcomes, like, oh, I'll find someone I love, or, oh, I'll get more money, or I'll have a better job that I like more, or whatever. I'll feel better about myself. I'll look better. I'll lose weight. All of the things that we want. There's nothing wrong with anything we want. But when we think about remediating difficult karma, one of the things that we don't think about is that within the Vedic tradition, when we talk about remediating karma, we're talking about the state of our consciousness becoming clearer and happier, not necessarily clearing up bad karma, like I don't end up in relationships I like. So in other words, clearing up bad karma has more to do with creating a state of well-being, peace, serenity, happiness, clear consciousness than it does necessarily with getting anything. So on that level, you have to be really careful, because when we think about remediating bad karma, often what we're really saying is, how do I get something I want? And how do I avoid something unpleasurable or something that I don't want? And insofar as we're treating karma as nothing more than like the patterns of what I get that I like or don't like, any remediation we do within that sphere is just continuing to entangle us in karma. Whereas paradoxically, when we think to myself, I just want to feel clearer, lighter, happier, more peaceful, more content, more loving, more present. And when we prioritize those qualities of consciousness as the source of our happiness, and we say, that's what I mean when I say I want to get rid of bad karma, right? Because then what we're really talking about is attachment or identification to karma rather than our true self. And so insofar as we want to feel better and change our consciousness so that we're just happier, more luminous beings, the advice is the same for every soul everywhere for thousands of years within this tradition. It's very similar in the West. First, be authentic, dharma, right action. Live in accordance with good conduct that aligns with a true sense of who you are. In other words, be honest, be sincere, try to be true to who you are inside psychologically and in the world, but do it also in a way that is kind and ethical in a very basic everyday sense. Be yourself, be a good person. I don't think we even have to explain it that much. When you're being yourself, it's so much, when you're being honest, you're not being pretentious, you're not overcompensating, you're not afraid or anxious all the time. Those are not easy places to get to, by the way. Trust me, I don't think they are. But think of how simple this advice is. Feel good about yourself, and be a decent person. That leads to a change in consciousness that frees you from karma. It doesn't free you from experiencing karma while you're incarnate, but it frees you from the attachment that creates the pain and suffering. That's the advice. Take it or leave it. I mean, again, I'm just presenting this because I thought it'd be an interesting angle for a talk today. Number two is yajna, or sacrifice, like a, do I have that word right? I think it's right. Anyway, it's sacrifice, which would be like, I have an altar practice and I offer things. Anything that you offer, whether it's an action or a prayer or a candle, and just saying, thank you for my existence. Please continue to, purify my consciousness, bring my consciousness up, however you want to put it. Dedicating an action to God, divinity, higher self is such a simple, basic, everyday thing that you can do. It can take 2 seconds, but that is thought to be a universal remedy for improving your state of consciousness. Tapas, austerity. Look, I'm someone who's gone through lots of austerity practices in my life, where you've done fasting and all that stuff. And I don't think it needs to be extreme, but a pretty simple thing would be like moderation. Like for many of us, being moderate with our food or our drink or our money or any way in which we learn to be a little bit more self-controlled, let's call it that, rather than austerity, which is like, okay, I'm going to stand by a fire, or I'm going to sit in an ice bath for 20 minutes and, chant mantras while I freeze to death. Clearly there's a whole tradition of austerity, right, that can be very purifying. And I'll say, as someone who's done plant diets in the Amazon, I've been in a sweat lodge ceremony with a Native American teacher, and those are wonderful. Doesn't have to be so extreme. It can just be, how do I practice self-control? Another one is bhakti, which is devotion. This is my favorite. Love, tenderness, devotion to the things and people that you love. It could be your plants, it could be your animals, it could be your altar, it could be your students. If you're an astrologer like myself, it could be your YouTube channel and the love and care that you pour into it that comes from your heart fire. When you pour your love into things and people in the world around you, it purifies your consciousness. That's bhakti. Most natural for me as a Cancer, by the way. This is why it was the yoga that I chose to study and get so involved in, because that natural act of loving attachment is so, to me, it's so human. It's like, I don't want to try to yoga my way out of being a human who experiences justice and injustice, or who can't stop crying for a day after the school shooting happens, right next to my daughter's school, and will get angry if someone tries to explain it away too simply. It's like, no, that's the heart that pours into things, that has feelings and emotion. So your emotional life directed toward divinity, directed toward the spirit souls in the world around you, that emotional care can be such a purifying thing to connect to. My wife, it's her plants, it's the kids, it's the animals we have in the house. She pours her love into those things, and I see what it does for her. For me, it tends to be my astrology, the content here. I just pour my heart into this stuff, and it's very purifying for me. This is why, one of the big reasons why I do it, and I'm able to do it so consistently without going mad, because when I pour my heart into something, it fills me up, and it cleanses the consciousness. It feels good. Jnana, knowledge, study things, study philosophy, study astrology. When you have a little bit more of even just glimpses of understanding the mind of God, not that it can be really, some of us are not really intellectually inclined, and that's fine. You don't have to be. You could just be more of a bhakti kind of person, but under some level of philosophical and intellectual development and understanding truth, understanding higher reality. Most people who are into astrology are here in part because the study of something sacred like this on an intellectual level is clarifying for your intellect. It spiritualizes your intellect. Like, better that than like getting stuck in a bunch of, endless mental chatter, which would happen for me for sure. And then finally, it's service and charity, which is seva, just selfless acts rather than selfish acts. But you can think about that in a million different ways. A selfless act may also be directed toward yourself, like self-care and self-love, I think, for sure. The point is that we sometimes go, well, what do I need to do for my Mercury? What do I need to do for my Venus? Or what do I do for my Sun? Or, what can I do about that Saturn opposition? It's like, it's really, really simple. Take care of your body, sleep right, eat good food, love people and love things, practice a little bit of self-control, be thoughtful about your, be moderate, do some acts of loving sacrifice and devotion, learn things that are spiritual, try to be yourself and be a decent person. If you are actively doing all of these things, the thought is that it changes your consciousness. And the way that remediates karma is it frees you from being so attached to the difficult things or the good things, which doesn't mean you don't get to experience them, learn from them, enjoy them even. It means that they don't become the source of further and further entanglement and pain and suffering. It's like there's enough suffering. So why get more and more entangled by it? Because we don't have a consciousness that can receive it. It's like suffering exists. There's nothing we're going to do about that. But these pieces of advice are pretty universal, and they give us a means by which to receive the experience of life, which includes suffering. Well, I thought it would be useful to have a lengthy, drawn out talk about karma, its role in the philosophical tradition. Many of the points of intersection exist between yoga philosophy and things like Hermeticism in the West, Platonism and Neoplatonism in the West, Stoicism, Orphism, Pythagoreanism, all these isms, all of which in turn are thought to have been influenced by Egyptian mysticism, who in turn shared roots with Indian mysticism. So it really is kind of a melting pot in the ancient world, but I don't think there's anything that I mentioned today, although it's coming from the Vedic tradition, can be thought about loosely as part of a perennial philosophy that existed in the ancient world, in my opinion. There's a great book called The Shape of Ancient Thought by Thomas McKively that outlines all of the parallels between Western mystical traditions and Indian Vedic tradition. If you wanted to read more about that, that's one of my favorites. But anyway, for today, I thought, look, we've got this karmic blossoming point coming up, and look, the ruler Jupiter is going to be square Mars. That square from Jupiter in Cancer to Mars in Libra, for many of us, will include reflections on cosmic law, will include reflections on moral, civic, social dimensions of fairness and unfairness, equity and inequity. So why not try to camp that in a bigger conversation for us that I hope is serviceable? Anyway, that's it for today. I hope you're having a good one, and stick around after I sign off. There's going to be a talk or a brief explanation of the upcoming retreat that we're taking, which I hope to see some of you on, and then we'll get back together. We'll be here again on Monday. All right, take it easy, everyone. Bye. Hey, everyone. Thanks for sticking around. I'm really excited to tell you more about the Oracle Within, the retreat that we'll be hosting in Mexico in June of 2026. So this is a little informational video that I've made to answer all the questions that you might have about the retreat. In this video, I'm going to start by telling you more about what you will learn on the retreat, what the focus of our studies will be. And then I'm going to tell you about our daily format and sort of what day-to-day life will look like at this retreat center outside of the actual material we'll be studying. I'm going to then tell you who this retreat is ideal for, what kind of background you may want to have before coming along. And then finally, I'm going to tell you more about how you can register. And of course, I'll take you over to the actual retreat website page so that you know where all of the information is located. There's also a really rich FAQ section that will probably answer any further questions you may have. On that note, let's start with what will I learn? So for a very long time, astrologers have talked about what astrology is. What is this? Is it some kind of karmic science? Is it a science of causal energies and influences? Is this actually scientific? Like, what order of knowing is astrology? If we say we can know something about reality, then how can we actually say that when it comes to astrology? These may seem like really deep, dense philosophical issues, but actually they're at the heart of what it means to really deepen into astrology. To have an understanding of what this actually is so fundamental and so helpful. Throughout all of the programs that I teach at Nightlight, I, of course, talk at length about my belief that astrology is a form of divination, that this is a language of signs and omens, very much like the tarot or the I Ching or many other systems of symbolic divination from all around the planet. We're going to spend a lot of time on this retreat talking about what astrology is. From a historical and philosophical perspective, what is divination? What is divination, not just in this tradition, but all over the planet? What kind of things does a divinatory view of the cosmos assume about the nature of reality, about the nature of the soul, and what we're actually doing as practitioners when we practice astrology or when we study it or when we use it for ourselves? So one of the teachers that I had that made a huge impact on me, and 12 years ago when Jupiter was last in Cancer, I hosted him for a retreat on astrology as a form of divination, is Jeffrey Cornelius. He wrote this book called The Moment of Astrology, Origins in Divination, which is, in my opinion, one of the best books on astrology ever written. This will be something like a preparatory textbook that a lot of students on the retreat I'll recommend read before you come to this course. Over the program for the course of a full week, in the mornings, we're going to be talking about the history, the metaphysics, the philosophy, the ancient mystics, and what they said about the nature of astrology itself. So we're going to think really deeply about what is astrology. Then in the afternoons, we're going to talk about how to connect with an oracle. Connecting with an oracle, connecting with astrology as a divinatory system, in other words, is about the marriage of intuition and being able to listen to the oracle speak while also utilizing the logic of craft. How do you marry those two things together? It's not something we take a lot of deliberate time to talk about as astrologers. So in the mornings, we're talking about history, philosophy, theory of astrology. In the afternoons, we're going to be talking about how to actually develop a living, vibrant relationship with an oracle so that it's informing how you approach the craft of a reading or how you approach the craft of astrology itself, if it's something that you maybe just use only for you in your own spiritual path. Either way, practitioners, hobby students are all welcome. So a lot of hands-on immersive work with charts, with live clients, with different systems of divination, and talking a lot about how to connect with an oracle experientially in our afternoons, where our mornings will be devoted to theory. It's about 30 to 40 hours worth of content that we'll be doing over the course of a week together, which means this is effectively like one of my advanced training programs condensed into a week. It's brand new material, brand new curriculum, doesn't appear anywhere else in the Nightlight programs, and yet everything that this program includes is really a condensation of the underlying philosophy of astrology itself that is a part of all of the Nightlight programs and all of my work as a whole. And again, most of that was deeply inspired by the work of Jeffrey Cornelius, who's I consider him something of a mentor in my life. So that's a bit about what you will learn. If you have questions about what you will learn, you can feel free to email me for more details, info@nightlightastrology.com. Now, I want to talk about the format of the retreat. When you're on this retreat, first of all, you're in a beautiful sort of jungle beach location near Puerto Vallarta, Mexico, for a week, which means we every day will not just be about theory and experiential, immersive, oracular work, which I'm very excited about. I have a ton of really good curriculum written for us as a group to go through. But in the mornings, we're going to have the option of starting your morning with breath work, yoga, meditation. In the evenings, we'll probably cap our days off with a little bit of centering as well. So my wife, Ashley, who I ran a yoga studio with for a decade, will be with me leading daily meditation and yoga. She is an incredibly good yoga teacher, very grounded and very, wherever your level is at, there'll be something there for you. And that's optional as well. So every day you have a little meditation and yoga. There's healthy food that serves people if you're vegan, vegetarian, or eat meat or whatever. There's options for food. There's a beach, there's a pool, there's some jungle hikes available. So our days will be broken into periods of free time, periods of rest, and periods of focused learning with things like meditation and yoga as options that are there for everyone. We'll also have some other meaningful group exercises that we'll do that will be, again, about how do you connect with an oracle? How do you make a conversation with the oracle a daily part of your life? So that's something of the format that you can look forward to in this beautiful kind of oceanside retreat setting. More information on the website. I'll show you that in a second. Who is this for? Ideally, you are someone who has a background in traditional Hellenistic astrology already. Wherever that comes from, if it's my courses or not, I want people coming to this retreat to have some pretty good solid background in Hellenistic astrology already. Or if you're from within our programs, then as long as you are enrolled in the year one program, you don't have to have finished it. You just need to be at least enrolled in it. Then you would be more than welcome. Any alumni from any of our programs would be welcome. And again, people who have some serious background in traditional astrology already, just because I don't want people to come along with maybe a modern background, but zero understanding of Hellenistic. So that would be who I would recommend this for. Spaces are limited and we anticipate the retreat will fill up rather quickly. So I really recommend registering as soon as you can. You also have the early bird rates to help you save. Finally, how do I register? I'm going to take you over to the website and you will find that here, the website, you can find it under the events page. Go to Immersive Retreat, or under the courses, it's our new course called The Oracle Within. When you scroll down, you're going to see everything that the program includes, basically everything I've gone over, maybe a little bit more details and depth there, as well as a little personal note for me that I wrote about why this means so much to me. You'll learn more about Mar de Jade, which is the beautiful retreat center. You can check it out. You're going to book through us. So you don't book through the retreat center, you book through us, and then we take care of it. At the bottom, you're going to find registration options that will be available starting on August 11th. That's today. Right now, as I'm looking at this, we don't have the prices listed yet. It's still kind of under construction. But at the bottom, you'll find different available options for registering. The different options will include different room options, and there's different. So if you want a private room versus maybe sharing a room with someone we'll assign you with that's part of the group, or maybe even a small group dorm room where there's like 5 people are sharing a room and you're comfortable being with other students on the trip, stuff like that. So there'll be some options there for everyone. There's an early bird rate that'll be in effect until October, saves you a little bit of money off the cost. And then also all of the different room options that are available at different price tiers depending on and they go first come first serve in terms of like, so there's some ocean view rooms. The people who book first will get the best. We just go best available first and just run it like that. So anyway, again, as you are looking over anything on the page, you have any questions, email us info@nightlightastrology.com. I hope that this has been helpful. I can't wait to have finally an immersive in-person training program in a beautiful location. It's nice to do things online, but I really love having in-person time available. And I know that you're going to also really enjoy working with Ashley. During the evenings throughout the week, Ashley will also have some little workshops that she'll be offering as options for people that are part of your retreat package that will be on plant spirit medicine topics and how to use different plant teachers to work with different astrological signatures in the chart. You got a difficult Mars, work with this plant. You got a challenged Venus, try this plant. So there's going to be some really fun little add-ons around plant spirit medicine that Ashley, if you know her on my channel, she talks about plants often, will also lead. So anyway, that's it. That's your informational video. I hope that this was useful. Hope to see some of you on the retreat in Mexico next year. Take it easy, everyone.